Welcome to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters is the future. I am Farouk Day, Vice Provost for Johns Hopkins University, and I am thrilled to be today with Kal Kallaugher, who is a cartoonist for the Economist Magazine of London, also for the Baltimore Sun, and for the Counterpoint. Is that right, Kal?
That's right.
Yeah. Welcome, Cal. I'm just so thrilled to have you today. We're going to have a fun and good conversation. In reading about you, you really have an interesting story. We're in the business of life design and helping people figure out what they should do with their lives. And I started reading about how you started this career of yours. You graduated from Harvard. You went to the UK and decided to go on a bicycle tour there of the British Isles. And after that, you joined a basketball club as a player and a coach. The club sounds like it went under financially.
Well,
So
it
you just
completely collapsed, but it was
was
done.
having a hard time. It was having a hard time. So you started
Yeah.
seeing the writing on the wall,
Mm.
and you started drawing caricatures of tourists,
Mm.
and that's how it took off. Tell us a little bit about how that got started. So from that first drawing that you drew after that, I'm sure you didn't have a vision of yourself being the cartoonist of all these magazines at that point, or maybe you did.
Well, as a youngster, I really enjoyed drawing, but I was always interested in becoming a cartoonist, partly because I grew up in suburban New York in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And not far from where I grew up was the aspiring Museum of Cartoon Art that had started when I was a young teenager. And I went down there and met other cartoonists, and I got to see the world of cartooning. And I think, this could be a really fun thing to do. So I did cartoons for my high school paper, for my college paper, and also my senior thesis at college was a 13-minute long animated cartoon.
Mhm.
So I always had this notion that I would go into cartooning in some capacity, as comic strips or animation of that sort. But when I went abroad, things really changed, because any person who's ever traveled knows that as an American abroad, you are held personally responsible for everything that goes on in this country.
Yeah.
So as a result, the more time I spent there, the more I started to reflect and think and look at the politics and just the general culture of America and its relationship to the world and so on. And I got a great interest in that. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to merge my interest in politics and my interest in cartooning to try to do political cartoons? So when I was in the UK and I was, money was getting tight, and I used to try to experiment doing caricatures live. And I thought, well, let me set up a stand on the street and start to see if I can make a little bit of money, just pocket money. And it also made me better at drawing. You see hundreds of people come by and you see all these different faces and their different shapes, and you really get a sense of the variety of the world. And then you get good at doing caricatures. Anyways, that's where it started. And then I started visiting all the newspapers in London. And believe it or not, my first job at age 21 was with The Economist. And I've been there now for 43 years.
Wow. Wow. What a great career. And you've commented through your art on so much that has happened in all of these years and decades. It's interesting, as I was thinking about our chat today, I was thinking about the lens that you look at, that you use to look at the world and all of the events. There's been a lot that's been happening in recent years and decades. Just this last year's, for example. So I've been looking at some of your work, and this one, for example, is about a little bit of the year that we've had recently. I don't know if you can tell behind me. This is COVID-19, right?
Yeah, this is a cartoon I just did a few months ago, and it's about the rollout of of our new vaccines, but the anti-vaxxers are getting in the way, and yet we have this triumphant our hero kind of character, our knight, coming in with our great weapon to take down the coronavirus, and we have these kind of what I would like to think is wrong-minded folks setting up roadblocks to get to the final bit of trying to be triumphant. And as you can hear me describe, what I'm trying to say is that what goes on in the brain of a cartoonist. You take something, ephemeral that's out in the world, you try to turn it into pictures, into metaphors, in ways that can be congealed into a single nugget, so that you, the consuming audience, can engage with it and ingest it really quickly, and hopefully reside in your brain for a little longer.
I think what you're doing also, in addition to telling a story, which is what you're saying, is that you're also making that part that all of us keep silent loud. Like, you bring it out of the silent part. I mean, that's what when I look at all of your art, I go, well, yeah, that's true. And a lot of us think that, but probably don't say it much. And it's interesting because you're right. In the last 12 months, we've been experiencing this devastating virus, but also with this pandemic, there was this pandemic of misinformation and of fear, and all of these challenges that we're experiencing. I love this one, for example, where you talk about these two pandemics of misinformation and of the virus. I'll get out of the way so that you can, so everybody can see it. What were you thinking here?
Yeah. So there's two airplanes. One is disseminating the coronavirus, and the other one is disseminating disinformation. They're saying, you consume their bodies, I'll consume their minds. So, when I consider myself my cartoons, I'm a columnist, really. Where I'm using pictures and satire and humor, but it's a vehicle for a message. And so I construct the cartoon at first like any columnist and journalist would do, which was you look at the landscape of what's going on, you decide a point that you want to make, and then you try to find the best possible way to be able to deliver that point. Mm-hmm. So it's every day is a little bit different, because I try to vary up the styles and vary up the approaches to the cartoons. And this was for Counterpoint. Now, Counterpoint is a online newsletter, cartoon newsletter, which anybody can get in their emails. And the thing about Counterpoint is that it allows me to operate in color, and also do more interesting and different sizes and shapes that you can do when you do digital things, in contrast to doing cartoons for the Baltimore Sun, where I give in a box, and the Economist, where I'm given a little box, and you have to operate within there. And also both of those are in black and white. This cartoon was in color, and allows me to do sometimes a little more elaborate things, because in color, it's another tool that allows you to get more information across.
Right. That's really interesting. Yeah, from a technical side, how you bring it all together that way. So when you look at all of the events that we've been experiencing, what on earth is happening right now in the world and in society? We are just. It feels like we're just getting dumped on as a society, or maybe we're just noticing it more or talking about it more. But through the lens that you use, what is going on? We're experiencing social justice issues, a pandemic, the politics of this country and of the world feel more tense than ever before. Injustice, there are economic issues. I'm sure you sit and you think about all of this before you start to turn it into stories through your art.
Yeah, so Farouk, is that all of those things, if you and I, we could talk for 10 hours just on all these various different things you mentioned, all the issues that are going on. But when I'm thinking about a cartoon, you can only choose one small bit, but just to take a step back for a moment, is that, I've been doing this thing, for 40 some odd years, as I mentioned before, is that you've seen a lot of shifts in the world and history essentially unfolding in front of us. One thing that's clear is that this little moment of time that we are all collectively sailing through is a pivotal, one of these, historical turning points, where things, when history books in the future will come back and say, look what happened here. What happened next was because what happened now. Part of the reason why this is so both concerning and frightening for some people is that we don't know where it's going to go. We're going to be able to tolerate and get through this. We're going to get through the pandemic. we're going to find a way through it. But do we muddle through and get into deeper water, or do we learn from this and build on this and turn ourselves into a stronger society, stronger world, better people? I mean, usually these kind of pivoting points in the world end up normally having a positive response over time as people kind of react. I mean, all of society, if you look at it as an arc, as the world is improving all the time slightly, there's going to be dips, but there's eventually going up. So to me, is the uncertainty of what happens next is the thing that engages me.
And what do you think will happen next? Are there drawings that are in your mind? Do you want to show us something now while we're talking about where? I think that's the $1 million question, right? Is what will the future be? We're all asking the right questions about how will work look, how will the economy look, how will schools in the future look, and feels like everything is changing, and part of us wants to go back to how things were.
You know, you're right. Part of us wants to go back to how things were, but also embracing change can be very exciting and gives you new opportunities, which is, some people are fearful of change. We have to embrace change. I think that if we want to be successful, one of the great things one of the attributes of America is its ability over, centuries is to be able to change and shift and move. And so how we respond to these challenges, as I said, are going to be really interesting. So do we embrace change? Well, I guess we have some really big issues on the politics side and on our cultural side. But I suspect that the three big areas of concern for me, which are more generic, well, one of them is going to be local, one is going to be national, one's going to be international, right? So to me, local crime, policing, giving basically a safe environment for people to operate and be able to thrive, big challenge. Nationally, it's democracy, the health of our democracy, which gerrymandering doesn't help, money in politics doesn't help, electoral college doesn't help, where people don't feel that we are being represented by our democracy, that our democracy is failing us. And the third, which may surprise people on the international, is going to be nuclear proliferation. Okay, now people haven't talked about this for a long time, but when you have economic downturns or you have tumult in the international order, then there are a few countries around the world that have nuclear weapons at their disposal. I'm not worried about a global tit for tat nuclear exchange between countries. I'm worried about a loose nuke or some dirty bomb getting in the hands of a terrorist group. We've already seen between 9/11 and January 6th that impassioned emotions can make people do pretty crazy things. And so you can imagine any group getting a dirty bomb, for example, and just dropping it in Washington, D.C. And then suddenly you have for a generation a whole part of the city that's polluted and can't be used, in addition to the loss of life at the time. So I fear in the future that the genie of the nuclear, terrorism might be uncorked and be a really big problem for us.
Yeah, I think those are definitely themes I have or some of them I've thought of, but I haven't thought of the nuclear issue. So I appreciate you bringing that. I know you've been also thinking a lot about climate. Today's Earth Day. And I think that's also another issue that we will have to tackle as a society in the future. You've done a lot of work that actually I noticed that clearly you're passionate about this, because I could see almost every 4 or 5 characters I'll find something about climate. I love this one personally, that while we're fighting the virus, there's climate looming in the back. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, and this cartoon was done probably just about a year ago. And I think in April, in fact, it was done. So we were early into the coronavirus battle. And it seemed overwhelming for us collectively, not just here in the US, not just here in Maryland, but we're talking about globally. That could we harness all of the energy of all the various different peoples and interests to be able to take on this global threat? And we already know, after being in involved with this for a year, how difficult it's been, and how it's hard to get people to coordinate and work together. Well, talk about climate change. That is what we're seeing now in coronavirus is going to pale compared to the challenges of climate change. And so this is like a test run to see how we'll be able to manage.
Yeah. What is the typical response to your work? How does your audience respond? I'm interested in those who are favorable, but also do you get pushback from the audience, and what does it look like?
Well, so the funny thing when you're in the criticism business, and that's what cartoons are, they're always kind of critical usually. Um, a majority of your contact with the public is negative, where people who tend to want to respond either through emails or faxes or whatever way is going to be negative, because those are the people that are energized. And every cartoon ticks somebody off. Believe me, always ticks somebody off. But what has happened with the advent of social media, now suddenly we get the first chance to have likes, where people like something and then they positively share it, and you go, wow. So you can sometimes have cartoons that really catch people's imagination, and then you'll see them get spread and passed along. In the early days when you did get so much negative stuff, you when you're in journalism particularly, you just take that as part of the deal. You just assume that there's people there liking what you say. Plus, as you can imagine, Farouk, is that you all, maybe people assume that you get lots of people saying, love that cartoon, you're great, awesome, that's fantastic. Well, no, it doesn't happen. In fact, everybody thinks you get that all the time, but you don't get it. But that doesn't matter to me. To me, is we're in a conversation. I like to think the cartoons are just one little tiny speck of a national conversation. And I fortunately have a form, which are cartoons, because they're fun and potentially funny, and it only takes 5 or 6 seconds to read. So people give you a chance that they can be easily engaged, and they can be a high platform and a big megaphone to try to get your ideas out there. But you don't go out there assuming you're going to change anybody's mind. You're just adding to the conversation. You're just trying to slowly push it in a certain direction. That's what you're hoping to do. That's almost the best you can do.
That's a helpful framework, I think, and not only in the business that you're in, but I think for all of us, is that if we approach our work from that perspective of just adding to the conversation and adding value, and be okay with a pushback. I think probably in your business you might have experienced a little more than pushback, not you personally, but it's around you. And this idea of cancel culture. Is this starting to impact people who do the work you do? Do you ever feel that fear going a little too far with some of the truth that you portray, that it might activate some sensitivities and might boomerang against you? Is that something you think about? And more importantly, what's happening in your business that is impacted by cancel culture?
Well, of course, this cancel culture thing it's a great name, isn't it? But it's actually been around forever. People have been trying to take down people they don't like, for example. And in the cartoon world, only a few years ago, Charlie Hebdo, where people who were found or aggrieved by certain cartoons marched into an office with automatic weapons and killed a half dozen cartoonists and others. So to be honest, in my business, because we are a negative art, and also because we deal in caricature, which is a really wicked way of addressing either an individual, a politician, or people or types and things of that nature, they really, really get people angry. And publishers have said in the past that there's nothing that gets an audience more riled up in a newspaper than a cartoon can. And so as a result, all of us in the business understand that we are juggling hand grenades when we do our cartoons. We have the potential to really have something explosive if we don't handle it carefully. Mm-hmm. So it means that even though we're dealing in strong issues and hot button stuff that we're dancing in a minefield, and we have to be very careful. Now, it doesn't mean that you necessarily stop what you're doing. It's just that you have to be mindful. However, even if you're mindful, that doesn't get you out of trouble with some people, because no matter what you do, as I said, people are going to be ticked off with a cartoon. So you're going to get pushback, and it's a question of how you respond to it. Now, I was president for a while of an international human rights group for cartoonists, because around the globe we have cartoonists who are jailed, tortured, and murdered for what they do. And so usually we find that the cartoonists who get in trouble, or the issues that we confront, is less about what we're trying to say. What's the point? It's usually how we say it that becomes an issue, the imagery, or the depiction. And so if you're mindful of that, that usually keeps you out of most trouble. But there's always going to be, somebody, who's going to be angry with your cartoon. In America, there's 390 million guns. It's something you got to worry about.
So how do you handle the balance of giving your opinion or your thoughts, or even just portraying the truth, or the part of the truth that nobody talks about, and the potential of hurting people, or either hurting them emotionally, or putting them in a position where they become potentially the laughing stock of their communities? Or is that something that you wrestle with?
Well, I because I'm dealing with, in the nature of things, public figures, that they're kind of fair game. But and that's also, even when you deal with public figures, for example, I don't do the children of public figures. I mean, what do they have? They haven't done anything. I don't try to bring them in. But for the public figures, and they're acting their personas as people, as individuals who have inserted themselves into the public eye, then they kind of get fair game. But I'm also not trying to go for cheap shots where I'm just, making fun of them for making fun of them's sake. It's usually for a political point that's helpful in the conversation. I also think that to be an effective cartoonist, and this is my own philosophy, I mean, every cartoonist looks at these things differently, is that you have to engage even the opposition. People don't agree with you. You want to have to engage them in some ways. And so if you insult them, then they're not necessarily going to pay attention. Now, of course, every person, we have a broad spectrum. Everyone has their own sensitivity. So you're bound to insult some people, whether you are trying to or not. So some people, I remember getting letters or comments at the Baltimore Sun where people saw things in the cartoon that I didn't even draw. And they said, I hated that guy who was standing in the background who was picking his nose. I said, I didn't draw any guy in the back. They just find things. So you're going to get that too, particularly if you're going to have millions of people reading your work. So the idea is that you try to work within, a framework that is, the goal of your cartoon is not to make people laugh. Your goal is not to tear people down. Your job is to make people think. And so you try to engage as many people as possible, because you can't engage everybody, by doing good drawing, by doing clever composition, using all these tools, but they're all a purpose for delivering a message.
That sentence that you just shared could be so true for anything else that we do. Like, I could take the word cartoonist and put leader, or mayor, or teacher, or any other profession, or just for us as human beings, and it would still apply. That is the ultimate goal, is that we're trying to add to value and encourage people to think. I love what you're saying, is that our goal isn't to make people laugh or tear them down. We're trying to add to the conversation. I know you have a lot of good work that you may want to share with us, and you have your iPad with you. Do you want to share some of the stuff that you're working on, or that you've worked on?
Sure. Let me see if I can call up my my iPad here and share it with everybody.
So as you do that, Cal, I'll show our audience here one of my favorite ones. This is also in honor of Earth Day. That shows just the irony of how humans handle the climate change, trying to nurture it on one side and burning it down on the other. again, it's always just the subliminal messages that we're all thinking about, and you bring them to in front of us. You know, you expose them and you turn them live. So love this one. This is the cover of your book, Daggers Drawn.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and it's a kind of a fun one because that's me down there in the foreground at the bottom, that's taking on all the important people all the time. So I just picked up like 4 or 5 cartoons for Farouk so that I could just share
Yeah.
with you the various different things. So one is this is a cover I've done for the Economist. So the Economist, I've done many covers over the year, 150 or something. I can't remember. Between the Economist and other magazines, just so people could see the kind of variety of styles and things that I do. But this cartoon is the cartoon that I just did last night. I completed it about 4 in the morning. It's the cartoon for this week's Economist. And it's another environmental cartoon because this is quote unquote climate week as this mentioned by Joe Biden. And there's big meetings going on, virtual meetings in Washington today and tomorrow with global leaders to try to plant the way forward. And so you can see in this cartoon a big tirade saying, do we have any volunteers to row harder? And this is kind of our global climate discussions in a nutshell, you say. So this was, and you can see this is done in black and white. I use 100-year-old pen nibs. I scratch away. It takes me 4 hours just to put the ink on the cartoon. Many more hours before that, designing it, composing the cartoon, and also coming up with the ideas. So as you can imagine, it's a full day undertaking to do a cartoon like this. So this cartoon is from Counterpoint. I taught you before. It's an online newsletter. Anybody can sign up, counterpoint.com. You get it free twice a week, but if you pay $15, you can get it every day of the week. And there's always 2 to 4 cartoons, and they are cartoons, one from the left and one from the right. So it's a really good balance. I really loved Counterpoint. So this cartoon, you know, I loved about this one is it has the great artwork, the color artwork that you can do in Counterpoint that I can't do with the others. But also Counterpoint is also interesting to me because you can be a bit more racier maybe in your imagery and your ideas than I can be in the more family-oriented newspaper, the Baltimore Sun. The Economist, which is much more erudite and sophisticated. So sometimes I can be a bit more jocular and so on with my cartoons with Counterpoint. So this cartoon I just wanted to show you because a contrast to the others, this I did for the Baltimore Sun, is that sometimes you do cartoons that are really simple, imagery, really clear and clean. Then other you do cartoons that are really complicated. That's partly because I like to vary up my artwork so that every time the viewing audience opens up a magazine or sees one of my cartoons, they don't know what they're going to get. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be visually exciting. And it also keeps it, by the way, really interesting for me too. Here's an Earth Day cartoon I did some years ago that kind of gives us, you know, the state of the affairs is that it's both a candles and smokestacks that mankind is, the human race is giving to our Mother Earth. Poor Mother Earth, right? And
Let's
then
celebrate Mother Earth's birthday.
Yeah, that's right. So I got 2 more to show you. This cartoon, to talk about complicated, this is a cartoon that I tell over time. It's like a little bit of a storyboard. It's like an animated cartoon, which I really like. So it starts off with the classic imagery of the all the characters coming out of the, you know, evolving from fish to mankind. And then what happens is that it doesn't stop there, because as mankind continues to evolve, the water level starts to go up. And what we see is the polar ice caps are melting, and there's the polar bear. And down in the right-hand corner, you see he just should have stayed a fish. Maybe that would have been better for evolution if mankind had just stayed a fish the entire time, because we're going to end up there anyways. So this cartoon I'm showing you because this is the cartoon that I completed just for a Counterpoint this week. And it's about Earth Day. So we're celebrating Earth Day, and we're really kind to Earth Day, to Earth rather. But the rest of the year, look what happens. We're just kind of kicking around while we do all our standard behaviors. So that's it, man. Those are just a few cartoons I wanted to show you guys.
I
Uh,
love it. You want to should we draw a couple of things or something
yeah,
real quick?
let me
I heard you say once in the talk that everyone was a cartoonist at some point in their life. So I think we can all do this. You made me think of my 6-year-old who's constantly drawing. So I'm thinking if she could do it, I probably did it at the age of 6 too, and all of us. So I encourage our audience to grab pen and paper and follow this.
Yeah, so I'm just I've got my an iPad, so I'm just going to draw. I'm just going to experiment a little bit here. I'm just getting used to the line. So you can imagine that, I told you before I use these really old pen nibs, ancient pen nibs. So the I pen here allows me to do quick sketches. So they're just to give you a little feeling. I'm drawing this cartoonist here as I'm on the Zoom call with you here. So there we go. This is just a little warm up drawing for me. So okay, that looks pretty good.
Who is this supposed to be?
That's supposed to be me, but yeah, that's a really funny looking cartoonist here with a beard. Maybe
Yeah.
a beard there. Okay, all right. So let's add another one here.
So it's really interesting as I watch you do this. You it sounds like one of the secrets is exaggerating some of the traits of people. So you give maybe somebody a bigger face or more hair or bigger nose or something like this. It sounds like that's a trick there.
Well, it's there's a lot of tools that go into caricature. I'm going to draw while I'm talking, if you don't mind. So one of the things that's really distinctive about every individual is the shape of your head. That's the most important bit, right? Is the shape of your head. So when you're trying to analyze or break down people, there's just a lot of shapes within each of our brain. And our eyes and our brain work really fast. When we go to see somebody new, we evaluate them. We're breaking down all these various elements, filing them together, making a little bit of an equation and trying to lock it and restore it in our brain. And so, people, and then within each shape, there's different shapes for the noses, right? That's a different shape. And then the eyes can be different shapes. Okay. So basically we're accumulations of really just lots of different shapes. And then where the position of the mouth is it down low? Is it up high? And then the hair changes the shape of your head too. So, all sorts of different ways that we have to evaluate shapes. And so I think that the cartoonist or the caricaturists, those people who are trying to draw faces, are always evaluating the shapes. And then once you have all the shapes and the equation that makes your face specific to you, then the artist caricaturist can start to play. Sometimes you can pull a nose out more. Sometimes you can make the mouth smaller. It's like silly putty. You're pulling, stretching to a point where it still retains that special quality of the individual, while at the same time making sure that you capture them. You don't want to stretch it so far that you lose the recognition. All right, so I'm just going to. You want me to draw a couple of guys, some people that I've done recently, Farouk?
Yeah, I'd love to, and I don't know if you want to go this far, but maybe make it a commentary about something that we're living through right now, whether it's the political tensions between parties or some of the social justice issues or on policing or anything like that. So, or climate, since it's Earth Day. So I don't know if that puts you on the spot, but I'd love for, yeah, like so feel free to draw a couple of people, and if you want to use it to make a commentary, let's do that.
Well, the thing about all my commentaries is that they do take a long time to try to sort out and come through. So I'm going to just, and also try to think and talk at the same time is a challenge. But as we're on Earth Day, clearly, if I did a cartoon about Earth Day, and this would be a kind of a generic conversation, it would have to involve an Earth, right? So I might as well draw an Earth to start and then see where my mind kind of drifts from here. So, one of the things about, I guess, as we engage with all things climate, is figuring out what we can do individually, right? what can we do to be able to impact and save the planet? Because all the stuff that's going on just seems to be too big. But at the same time, those of us who are in conversations, people are thinking, people who are in education, like you, Farouk, anybody who's dealing with this stuff, you constantly tell people is that you can make a difference, and part of it is spreading knowledge and information so people can make informed decisions and making sure you're combating ignorance, right? So maybe I could just do this. Is that this might be a very simple, but maybe it kind of gets to the point. Is that we can often feel that each of us individually is trying to save the planet, but it can seem to be too difficult, right? Almost like it's like Sisyphus trying to push a rock up the hill. This is like each of us feel that what we're trying to do is pulling and doing it all by ourselves. But what happens is if everybody does it together, okay, if everybody becomes their own individual Sisyphus, suddenly you have hundreds and thousands and millions of people trying to push the world and the globe into a new and better place. Then we can possibly all do it together. So I guess that'll be the kind of the imagery that I might think of for an Earth Day cartoon.
Beautiful, beautiful. How do you where do you get your inspiration? Are there moments where and also more importantly, what happens when you are inspired? Do you just drop everything and you hit pen to paper? What's your process for making these things happen?
Well, one of the great things, when you're doing creative, do you want to turn this off the share screen?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's get us back.
Either, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
There you go. Turn off the
there
camera.
we go. So let me just get the camera off here. Sorry about this.
Good.
So the thing about when you're in the creative field and you're doing stuff in newspapers, we have unforgiving deadlines, fast deadlines. I'm going to do a cartoon today for Sunday's Baltimore Sun. I got to do it. It's got to be over, and that's going to be read by several million people later. So you learn to be efficient and creative. How do you be creative on a timeline and still be able to deliver quality goods? That to me is one of the great challenges. And I've already published like 10,000 cartoons, so I've done it a lot, but that doesn't make it every single time a challenge. And you have to enjoy that challenge, by the way. It's got to be fun. I mean, given the prospects of a tight deadline, trying to get something done, that gets me juiced. Many people see that, they go, they freeze, they panic. For me, it's just like, all right, let's go. So I really love that kind of stuff. But the thing is that inspiration, I guess a lot of it is just keeping up with all what's going on. And then, trying to say something that is going to be compelling and interesting. So it's like having your own personal internal conversation. And I know that, you and I could speak about climate change, and you could say something, I could say something, and each one of those sentences can be turned into a cartoon. So that's the way I kind of operate, is this idea of coming up with an idea first. The idea is prime. How do you execute it? That's a whole nother trick. And sometimes there's equations and ways to approach those subjects that you've learned over time. Because remember, you're working on a deadline. You can't spend all day just going, oh, I'm going to go have a walk and think about a cartoon. No, you got 45 minutes to come up with a cartoon idea. Right. And you work out angles and perspectives and ways to approach it. You also, because I'm a student of cartooning, in addition to creating 10,000, I've probably seen a million. So I've seen how all these various different people have approached subjects, and they teach me things. I go, oh, that's interesting. How about that? So I've learned, a whole ways to approaching projects, ways of approaching problems, and how to solve them. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is that ultimately you become a problem solver. You create these problems, you try to solve them on a deadline.
We have a question from the audience. What are some of the go-tos when you have creative block?
Well, I don't have any go-to cartoons. Like, I don't keep any cartoons backed up. Everyone is going to be fresh. Um, that's a really good question, because I think that I know that I can come up with a cartoon on any given subject, but I believe the question is, can I deliver a home run? You know, if I'm going to use a baseball metaphor, because cartoonists like using metaphors, right? So use a baseball metaphor, is that every day you want to get on base. All right, you're up at the bat. You know, you don't know what the news is. You don't know what pitch is coming your way. You don't know what's coming your way. But all you want to do is get on first base. That's all you want to do. Now, the great days and some of the cartoons you've shown, and maybe the cartoons I've shown as well, are home runs. You know, you get it's a big story coming down there. Bam, you do your best job, and wham, it's a beautiful home run. But some days, either the subject matter is not that compelling. You're not as inspired, or maybe you're not well. You're coming down with a flu or something. You're just not all the bits are not clicking. But you got to get on first base. So maybe it's a bunt single, but you're going to get on base. And for me, because I have now amassed a capability with drawing, at least I know I can draw something really well. So I can make it compelling to people, even if the idea is not the best. But for me to be a successful cartoon of your career, you want to have a high batting average, and you want not just to get on base, you want to get doubles and triples consistently. You want to be constantly doing it. And that's, to me, is kind of the gauge of a really good cartoonist, is somebody who's got a high batting average.
So, and on the days when you just are not getting any creativity, like it's just there's a creative block, are there things that are outside of your art or something that you do for yourself to just kind of get yourself back into that zone?
Well, I've learned to bypass the creative block bit.
How did you do that?
I had this. Well, I had this situation. I don't remember the day, but I was driving my kids to school, right? And as I was going from school downtown, I was beginning to not get well. I could tell, the gray clouds are coming over my head. And by the time I got into work, I was firing on two cylinders. I was just barely getting by. And I remember I did a cartoon on that day that was barely passable, right? And when you're sick, it's your brain is also not working. Everything is kind of cloudy. And I suddenly, at the end of that day, it suddenly lifted a huge anvil off of my shoulders, because every day when I was going into work, and still today, you have to produce something. And you also, at some point in your career, particularly kind of early in your career, you wonder if you have 10,000 cartoons in here, or if you're going to run out of ideas. And on that day, on a day when I felt really bad and things were working, when I suddenly realized I could produce something of a minimum professional standard, it released a lot of the pressure, because you just knew you could do it. So you start there. But also, here's the other thing. One thing that, Farouk, I guess you and I, me more than you, because I think I've been on this planet a little bit longer than you have, is that you do accumulate something with age, and that's wisdom and experience. And the pool of cartoons and the pool of creativity I've discovered, Farouk, doesn't narrow and dry up as you get older, as you kind of drink from it so much. No, instead, due to your wisdom and experience, the pool gets wider and deeper. There's more ways and more things you've learned. And suddenly the prospects and the ideas are more available. And so I don't fear anymore. I do not fear evermore about running out of ideas.
There's so much here that you're saying that applies to all of us as we try to think of how we build our lives and our careers. And I think for me, those are some of the lessons, that for us to be fearless. So to try to get to that stage where we are fearless, we're no longer fear failure or fear not having enough ideas. I think what I'm hearing from you also is to try anyway. And something that you said that I think will resonate with me for a long time is to establish a minimum standard for yourself that you will never go below. So even on your worst days, and even on the days when we have these blocks, we can at least achieve that, and if you start from there, then we can get to that greatness. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can draw from the experiences you're sharing. So I want to thank you for that.
Mhm.
uh, I want to go back to.
I'm going to
Oh,
just
go
share
ahead.
one more thought is that
Yes, please.
because as you were talking about this fear and failure, is that to me, that is one of the crucial elements about progress, both as a nation, but also as a culture and as an individual, is um, you're going to fail a lot. You're just going to fail a lot. You got to try things and fail, try and fail, try and fail. But that's what, when you fail is it's about what do you learned and how do you apply it? So I mentioned to you, I played basketball, right? I played basketball for 45 years and I love basketball. But the one thing about basketball is you're constantly failing. Every time you throw the ball up and you miss, it's a failure. It's
Yeah.
how you deal with that and try to make things to go the other way. And so learning from failure to me is one of the great things, and not fearing failure, because that can freeze you up and then things don't happen. So in my cartoons, when I'm drawing, I tell you, I'm failing all the time. I'm making mistakes, but I experiment. And one of the key things that I try to teach people who are trying to draw is that don't just sketch away, because you're going to do a lot of bad ones. And I believe me, you guys to see my artwork looks good, guys. I've done lots of bad ones, lots and lots of bad ones. So you just keep on going. It's the only way you're going to learn.
Yeah, you're reminding me of Duke's basketball coach, famous saying, "Next play."
Yeah,
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 you might have heard of that. So
yeah.
his thing is that it's about next play. So whether you lose the game or you win the game, it's
Right.
about the next play.
Yeah,
And that was a way for him to always recenter the team
yeah.
on what's coming next, so that you don't just keep being stuck in what just happened, whether you lost the game or won it. So
Right.
you, from one basketball analogy to
That's
another.
it. That's it.
So everything that's happening around the world, that take us back to, for example, this one that you've done. This one was so meaningful because you're trying to talk about both COVID-19 and the economy and debt, and how
Yeah.
we're using debt to pull ourselves out of this disease. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and going back to our notion of trying to make people think. When I do cartoons, I'd like to think that they have a variety of different elements to them that you can glean. Um, I also had mentioned earlier that people have only about 5 seconds with your cartoon. I like to stretch that to 10 seconds, maybe, if I can get people to reside a little bit longer, because it's got a little bit more there and makes people stop and reflect a little bit. And then this cartoon was about a year ago, I think, and it was at a time when we were all just trying to do whatever we could to get out of this stuff. And of course, when you do that, you're gonna have to pay for it at some point. And I'm not saying that necessarily in this case it's a bad investment. And a good example is what we're talking about collectively about infrastructure spending and lots of government spending. Sometimes that's good. You have to do it. And you're going to have to pay for it later, but understand that the investment now is the most important thing. Dealing with things now is the most important thing.
With that said, isn't the level of debt that this country is accruing concerning, or should it not be concerning to all of us?
Well, I mean, people like to think as government debt, and they compare it to their own personal debt and how you can't overspend personally. And there's a lot of truth to that. But on the other, the government has other opportunities, and they can use debt more to be able to carry on. But also when you're talking like about infrastructure, you go into debt, but you're building the foundations for future growth. And so there's all sorts of different economic models. There are people on one part of the economic spectrum who say, oh no, the debt is the dominant thing. And then you've got to deal with that. And then others who say, no, it's not as big as you think, because if you put the government money into stuff, then it's going to, it will do the job for you, just bring all the money back. So there's these kind of conversations. What to me is most interesting about our conversation today is, for 50 years, the standard thoughts was no, debt is most important. We got to tackle that. And now suddenly it's shifting. The collective cultural view is shifting about government's roles and what government can do. And it may shift things for another decades. So that's part of our kind of historic pivot we're talking about right now. This is one element. It's surprising because people talk about the big things, but our perspective about what government can do and what government needs to do and the money it can spend is a big shifting point right now.
Yeah, I think you're right, but at the same time, I think what's happening is this gridlock that we're seeing in our government. That I'm not sure if it's helpful or not. I know you show it in some of your work. I love this one. This arm wrestling that's literally breaking the house or putting cracks on the house. This can't be helpful for our society or our in our country. Are we ever going to get past this in the future? What are your thoughts about that? And maybe you can use this art to explain it.
Well, so I've done lots of cartoons, and of course, you don't need to do cartoons about this because everyone knows it. They understand the kind of the deep divide, and it's the deepest, of course, since in my lifetime. But also for those who study history, we haven't been this kind of divided for many years. And the question is, what happens next? I suspect in the short run, it may get worse before it gets better. I thought January 6th might be the nadir of how bad things are and how BL shift, but there's possibilities where those elements have not completely disappeared. They're going to be around for a little while. But I suspect, though, as we talk about a generational change, if we're talking about a decade or two, the country is going to be, it's going to be increasingly diverse in its population. The younger generation, the Generation Z, and those as they emerge are generally a more tolerant generation than those that came before. I suspect the nature of our country is going to be shifting and changing. It always has, but I think it's going to see some really big shifts in the future. All these shifts create tensions, but I think that we're going in the right direction. And the direction, actually, crazy enough, starts this week. Doesn't start this week, but when you have the results of the COVID trial, these are small little baby steps toward a society that needs to be more tolerant. People talk about the extremes between the right and left being the issues in the country, and that is certainly big. Really, the country is majority in the middle. It's definitely we're in the middle, but the voices on the edges are dominating. To me, the thing to measure our society is how tolerant it is. We're a battle between tolerance and intolerance. And so, as we become a more tolerant society and we understand collectively, which I think this is at the heart of our nation, that we're stronger as a diverse nation, is that makes us a better place rather than a weaker place or a worse place. That idea is going to come more and more into the fore in the decades ahead, and I think that will be one of the things that makes our country great.
Yeah, I think my hope also, Cal, is that we not only reach that level of tolerance, because to me that's the baseline. That's not the goal. That's the starting point. That eventually we will get as a society to a place where we are doing more even than tolerating. I hope that we will get to a place where we are accepting differences and then even celebrating those differences with one another. We're far from that, and as a step one, let's just get to that place. I hear what you're saying, and put up with one another at least for a little while. But I think there is a greater goal for the world, even, is to just get to a place where there's this genuine appreciation and celebration of the different perspectives and the different backgrounds and what people bring to the table. And that we have so much work to that. So maybe we'll see a caricature
You'll
about
see
that.
Hundreds of them. That could be another 10,000 right there, man.
I can't wait for that. You talked a little bit about the new generation. And I think we're all experiencing a generational divide right now, or maybe a transition. I don't like to use the word divide. A transition between the previous one and the new one. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah. Now, if you shift the other, that's why I can read it. So this is a funny one. I was doing a talk in Paris, I think, about the changes in technology and stuff, and that the older generation was having a harder time coming to terms with it. So I came up with this idea. I mean, it was a pretty clear, because a lot of people at home have probably had this very conversation where the one of the younger generation has their device and says, "Hey, Dad, did you see you can download an app to crowdsource a drone that would deliver your meal while in your Uber on your way to your Airbnb and pay with cryptocurrency?" And then the dad says, was this in the paper, in the newspaper? So, so it's different, generational changes. I'm, even though I come from an older generation, I have to, from my media world, fully embrace technology. So I do a lot of work, my cartoons digitally, and delivering my cartoons. And of course, a lot of my information I get is digital. And so, I suspect that what I'm really interested in is the next generation, because every technologies we couldn't even imagine when we were growing up are available now. Well, the same thing's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years. There's technologies we can't even imagine that are going to take place. And how will the youngsters of today respond to the changes of technology ahead?
That's I think there's a lot of hope, and I'll tell you, as somebody who has embraced technology, and I always thought of myself as the younger one in the room. I'm already starting to experience this generational divide with my own kids, where I was thinking, wait, I thought I know all of these things that you're describing in this cartoon, and can use them really well. But my 12-year-old and 14-year-old are starting to use buzzwords around the house that I have to go Google because I just don't want to fall behind.
Right.
So I think it's inevitable, but we can all learn from one another. This is really fascinating. What's the future for cartoonists look like?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question, because cartooning is its natural home is newspapers, and it has been, since the beginning of cartooning, and now as we're shifting more to a digital and landscape and a different kind of modes of consumption of cartoons. I still remain hopeful, but as in so many professions, finding ways of making money in online is trickier, right? And so as newspapers are folding and cartoonists are being laid off, they're having a hard time to try to move into the new world. Now, having said that, the world of satire, visual satire, is growing at massive rates. If you go online, people can do their own memes and GIFs and do their own cartoons using Photoshop and things like that. You don't have to be a great draftsman like that I've accumulated over 40 years. You can find it doing your own ways. And satire is healthy for society to me. You can really gauge the maturity of a world by the amount of satire it can endure. I think it's very helpful. And so I feel really good about that. I also think, but the Counterpoint is a good example. We pay cartoonists to appear in this format. We have, over 100,000 subscribers right now, more and more coming. I think this is going to grow. So it's going to be a new venue. There's going to be new venues. But I really think that the future for young cartoon people who want to use cartoons as forms of entertainment and communication and commentary, animation is going to be a way forward. Doing drawing and animation, that's going to be a really compelling way to tell your tale.
Yeah, and you illustrated that earlier in with one of your work, the one who was bouncing the earth.
Yes, right.
So something like that, right?
Sure. No, yeah. There's going to be all sorts of new things.
That's really interesting. So I always ask my guests at the end of Vision Chats, describe the future in one image, and it can't be more appropriate than doing it with you. You don't have to try it; just sort of stating what's one image in your mind that could describe just the future.
All right, so the future, I like to go fishing. Fishing is a fun thing for me, and partly because one of the magic about fishing is about hope. It's all about every time you throw your line back in, the next time you're going to catch something. And that what makes you keep on throwing it back in, even though you fail, is hope. And hope is this beautiful thing that mankind has. It what keeps us alive. And we all know people, when they lose hope, things degenerate really fast. And so I am hopeful for the future. I think the world has a great possibility. So I would like, if this is my image, if I was drawing a cartoon, If I was a cartoonist, this is what I draw. I draw a big round pond, and the pond would be actually the globe. It would look like the globe flattened down. It'd be big, beautiful blue, a kind of blue that just you can't help but look at because it's so great. And then I would be casting my line in there, and I would be encouraging others to, because the world is full of hope. And that's what we have. We're casting our line in, and we're going to keep on casting. We're all going to keep on doing this to get the most out of the world.
Beautiful. I couldn't have come up with a better image. I hope I get to see it at some point in one of your cartoons. Cal, you have given me hope during this hour, and I'm sure to our audience. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing. Please keep doing it. And you're making a difference. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for participating in today's Vision Chat. And remember, the only vision that matters is the one that you create. Thank you and blessings.